So the first rule that we have is intent. Now, I almost didn't use this one because it sounds obvious. Like, of course, you have to have intent. But what I found is the number one reason and the way that we have scaled all the business we scaled is because it was our intention to do so. In our minds, we were always asking, how can we do this better? How can we do more of this? How can we automate this? How can we get more done with less time? And what I found is most people who haven't scaled their business or aren't scaling their business for side hustle is it's not their intention to do so. Kristen Armstrong, who's the one of the best women cyclists that's ever cycled, she said we either live with intention or exist by default. And I just see so many people going throughout their lives and they don't have an intention to change things, and they just kind of are reactive to things that are going on in their life, and they don't really get the places that they want to go. So number one is intent. Your brain is an insanely powerful tool. And if you give it a problem to solve, it'll usually go to work doing it. So first of all, you got to have that big vision. You got to know where you want to go. You got to have the intention to want to grow and scale. And that's rule number one.
That's a really powerful one. And it's like, I'm kind of with you. Like, do you even include that? Because it's like, it's almost so obvious and almost woo-woo of like the power of positive thinking. If you believe it, it'll start to come true.
Totally.
But we've heard from so many entrepreneurs, like, if you don't have this vision of where you want to go, then how are you ever going to get there? And like, trying to do Brian Scudamore from 1-800-GOT-JUNK, he called it his painted picture vision of like, hey, 5 years down the road, this is what the business is going to be doing. This is what it's going to look like from a branding perspective. And then just kind of working backwards to get, from the reality that is today, how do we make that happen? And I love this line of, we live with intention or exist by default. And I find myself guilty of this as much as anybody. So
Yep.
This is not like, preaching from on high, but like you're going through the motions day to day and you feel like kind of just in maintenance mode. And like you described it, reactive versus driving your own agenda forward, living with intention. And it often feels like I'm too busy chopping down trees to sharpen the saw. And you kind of get stuck in that. Like anything that has worked for you exercise wise or other resource wise to get clear on this intention or where you want to go?
I always start with the goal, and it's usually often it's a money goal, it's a number goal. For example, when we started flipping 100 houses a year, I was sitting at, I remember we were at Wild Buffalo Wings with a bunch of other investor friends, and together I started counting up how many houses we had all flipped collectively that past year, and it was just over 100. And I said, I want to flip 100 houses, just my business alone. And so I had that goal. Everyone laughed at me. They thought I was... Everyone laughed at me. They thought I was crazy.
It's like a house every 3.5 days. Like, how does this even happen?
Yeah. And up until that point, we definitely hadn't done that many, right? But I just thought, why can't I do this? So I just started thinking in my mind, how can we do it? How can we do it? It started with a goal. Also wanted to get to a 7-figure income. So it was constantly just working those numbers. How can we get there? How can we get there? And then, I mean, we'll kind of go through. I don't want to we'll go through the rest of the rules, right? We'll share how we're gonna help them get there, essentially. So, rule number 2, should we move on to it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So rule number 2, essentially, rule number 2 is eliminate. And essentially, the way this works is you want to write down everything that you're currently doing in your business and your life. And you just want to start getting rid of anything you can. I'm all about having multiple streams of income, but if you're spending a lot of time doing some things that you're not getting great results, you might want to just let those things go. And, Peter Drucker said, there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which shouldn't be done at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Nick, but there are a lot of times where I'll find myself working on this project and it's taking a ton of time and energy and I'm getting frustrated with it. And I just sit and think about it. And I think about my long-term goals and I'm just like, do I even need to do this? Like, is this even something that matters or is it important right now? And sometimes I'll just eliminate it completely.
What was an example for you?
When we started Millionaire University, Tara and I were doing everything. We thought we had to have our social medias dialed in. We were doing the podcast. We were trying to collect emails. We were doing blogging. We were doing Twitter threads, which now you have threads. Like, we were trying to do it all. And it was fun for about a week. And then it started to get exhausting and overwhelming. And we were like, what are we doing? We don't even have to have a business, but we're doing this business because we got bored and we weren't fulfilled. And so we started a business, and now we were just working and working and working and not enjoying anything that we had done. And so we just came to the realization, okay, what is the one thing that we want to focus on? And it was the podcast. And so we still did some social media stuff, but it was very limited. We didn't worry about any other metrics. We just worried about growing our podcast. We weren't getting traction in anything. Here we had built other successful businesses. We had pretty good cash flow coming in, and we were just working our guts out and not getting any traction because we were spread too thin and weren't really getting anywhere.
Is that the deciding factor of like, well, if I'm not seeing traction, and the combination of I really don't enjoy doing it, because the counter argument would be like, well, I'm not seeing traction, but I only gave it a week. Like, I gotta put in some reps. I gotta put in some time here to grow an Instagram audience, to grow a Twitter audience, or something like that.
I think it's a combination of both, right? We decided, what are we best at and what do we enjoy the most? And let's put everything else on the back burner. Doesn't mean we're not going to go back to it at some point, but let's put it all on the back burner and really double down and focus on what we enjoy the most, because it gives us the most energy, and what we think we're the best at, and just so we can really focus in on it. And that was the podcast. And the truth is, even at the beginning, we weren't getting a lot of traction in the podcast. We had done several podcasts in the past, and we thought, this is like our fourth podcast. We're going to kill it. And we published it, and it was crickets. Like, we had several episodes ready. We built this website. We were excited for everyone to reach out and be like, yeah, Millionaire University, you guys are going to change the world. And nothing happened. It was so disappointing. And even after we limited other stuff, it was still crickets. But after focusing on that one thing, just growing the podcast numbers in any way we could, creating the best content we could for the podcast, we did start to see traction, to the point today where we now in the past 30 days have over 260,000 downloads. And it's just, everything has changed. Now we have traction. We can go back and start to do some of those other things over time.
Yeah, I feel like there's a certain pressure to be everywhere and try all these different channels. But the brands and creators that you see doing that likely have a team in place. So they've been doing this for years, where they've really honed in the systems for it. Because
100%.
And if you're trying to do that as a side hustle, you're just like, oh my God. And that's the reason I've had such a hard time justifying or dedicating the time to short form social platforms. It's like, I'd so much rather create long form content that's going to be around for years than
100%.
Than come up with this thread that may or may not get any traction or eyeballs and is gone tomorrow, even if it does. I guess it's just kind of a weird. And one of the things that I eliminated early on that I felt was very necessary in the business was the email opt-in form had like first name, email, right? And some people would not fill in the first name. It was like an optional field. But I still remember doing this in Aweber, copying and paste this email. And sometimes it would be like, John Smith at yahoo.com. It's like, okay, I'm going to guess that this guy's name was John. So I'm going to put in John. And like, just so it would show up like more personalized broadcast emails. It's like, if somebody didn't care to put in their name, like, just, I don't know, the cumulative hours I probably spent doing this, like in the name of a more personalized experience. But that was something that has long since been eliminated. So that's rule number 2, eliminate what is not getting results or driving you towards that intention. But what's number 3 for us?
Rule number 3 is automate. So now you want to take that same list that you had all those things on, you eliminate everything you can, and also eliminate things in your personal life. They say the average person consumes about 8 hours of media per day. So imagine if you could just cut that in half. If you're at 4, cut it to 2. I'm not saying don't watch any TV, or like I would be a hypocrite, right?
Yeah.
Or Netflix or anything, but just cut that in half. It'll buy back a lot of your time. So then you're going to take that list of what's left over, and number 3 and 4 kind of go together. You're going to write down, you're going to figure out what you can automate, which is number 3, and then number 4, which is delegate. So you're going to look at this list, and you're not going to think, can I automate or delegate these things? You're going to think, how can I automate and delegate everything on this list? Now, you want to start with the things that take the most of your time and you feel like would be the easiest to automate or to delegate. So for us, for example, when we were flipping houses, we spent most of our time making offers on houses, fixing up houses, managing contractors, that sort of thing. So some of the things that we did was we hired an assistant and we trained her our exact criteria for making offers. And then she later trained our agents, and we had all these agents out making offers, which we gave them authorization to make offers on our behalf based on our criteria. And they were making hundreds of offers without us even knowing anything or seeing the house or seeing that number until one got accepted. Then we would briefly go over it and review it, make sure it was good. We had a 14-day inspection clause.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a certain level of trust in there, but as long as you have like a risk reversal.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Get out of jail free
100%.
here.
Yeah. And then we had just a couple contractors that we worked with, and they had the people they worked with. And we would use the exact same materials for every house. So the decision making went out the door. We knew what we were buying similar types of houses, and would use the same color paint, same type of finishes. And then another thing that we did, we realized we were spending a ton of time working with contractors and coming up with, it was to have like, the beginning would have like three people go to the property and come up with these different bids and would haggle back and forth. And I was sitting down one day and looking at these bids, and I was like, at the end of the day, they're all ending up about the same place. So why don't we just start there? And we came up with a list that had every line item that the contractors would do. And we came up with a pre-agreed price, and we had our contractors agree to that ahead of time. So we no longer had to do multiple bids. There was no longer any haggling. We knew exactly what we were paying for a house, for paint, for like the square footage of the house. We knew what we were paying for flooring based on how big the flooring was. It was all laid out. It made it very simple, and really saved a lot of time in that way. So
okay. Yeah, so rule 2, 3, and 4, eliminate, automate, delegate in that order, right? There's no sense in automating or delegating stuff that doesn't need to be done in the first place.
100%.
But figuring out, and even if it's something as simple as sending an email, like I have found certain triggers would necessitate sending an email to another member of the team. It's like, okay, the trigger is that file is delivered back from the editor. So now I need to send a note to the writer that it's ready to summarize. Like, oh, if they're uploading it to a specific folder in Google Drive, like, okay, make, used to be Zapier, but like make.com, like can automatically send that email trigger, that like task notification system, or it could automatically add tasks to Asana. And it's like different things to, even if it's just, individually, it only took a couple seconds, but like now you don't have to think about that. And then, delegating that to somebody else on your team, like the combo platter of automation and delegation can be super powerful. For me, it was, bookkeeping tasks years later than I should have, where it's like every, PayPal notification would come through. It's like, it was kind of like the dopamine hit of like, I made some money. I get paid. I better go log this in my to the minute, accounting spreadsheet, basically. It's like, oh my God, the task switching costs of, all this sort of thing versus having a bookkeeper that can, tap into your accounts and just, create that summary for you all at once.
So in our house flipping education business, essentially the way it worked out, it was like, what were all the main things that we needed to do? We needed a tech guy. I need someone who was constantly making offers and funnels and sending out emails. So we brought on a guy to do that. And then it was essentially coaching. So I initially did the coaching myself, but then brought someone on to help with the coaching. And over time, brought on other coaches. Eventually, our COO was one of our first high-level students. And over time, he ended up... So we got to the point in the business where I was no longer needed in my house flipping business or my education business or my coaching business. And I would show up to events and just kind of talk a little bit and record stuff and just kind of hang out. And eventually that, when we were ready to sell the business, it was an easy exit.
Well,
because we weren't needed anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it more sellable, or makes it sellable in the first place. Exactly. To not rely on you. But it's interesting too with the podcast. It's not. In fact, it's rarely you behind the mic, but it's from how it started to where it is today.
Yeah. So the same thing with our podcast now. It's like, what are the main things that we focus on? What are the main levers? And it's create podcast content. And our goal is to I always use you as an example. I'm like, is our content as good as Nick Loper's content? If it's not, we got to keep working on it, right? So that's kind of the gold standard, is we're always trying to improve the content, and then we're trying to grow our numbers, right? And that I'll get into that in the upcoming ones. But yeah, You're right. We're to the point where Tara and I, who Tara's sitting over here, but we rarely even show up on the podcast. So we've created this podcast that has over 250,000 downloads per month. If I want to show up, we show up. Yeah. Right. But my goal is to create businesses where I don't have to be a part of. If something happens, that's because the truth is there are some days where I don't want to do anything. There's some days where I feel super motivated and want to talk. And I like to run businesses in a way that I don't have to be involved if I don't want to or I can't. And that to me personally is kind of like the ultimate true freedom, right?
Yeah.
So
was there any pushback from listeners? It'd be like, whoa, who's this new guy asking the questions?
No. So the way we did it, and this was pretty similar to how we did our coaches, was actually the first person I brought on was Brian Guerin, who I heard on your
guest,
I heard on your episode. So I reached out to him. I was like, hey, you are awesome. Can I interview you? So we kind of built a relationship. And then I asked him, I said, hey, do you want to help me interview people on the show? And of course, he was excited to do that because it gives him notoriety. We pay him a little something. We give him a little bit of equity. We kind of made it this win-win situation.
Okay.
And there wasn't pushback because they had already heard from him. And then I think I don't know if I interviewed him again, or the first couple times that he interviewed someone, I did the intro and outro. So I helped the guests kind of get warmed up to him. You know how you watch a TV show or a series, and if a new person just comes in and you don't know who they are, you're like, hey, who's that? What's going on?
Yeah.
But if you kind of get warmed up to them over time, you're like, okay, I like this person. I can jive with that. Yeah. So I did the same thing with the other two hosts that we have. I was people, Eric Fisher, who he's been on the show a couple times. I've been on his show. So usually I like to have the audience.
Long time podcaster, beyond the to-do list. Yeah.
I know, long time, man. So I usually like to have the audience hear them a few times before I let them just kind of go on their own and do their own thing.
Yeah.
We have not had any pushback. I still listen to every episode. I'm kind of like quality control. There have been some episodes that I've sent back and said, hey, we got to get more details on this one, right? But the goal is eventually where I don't have to do that quality control, right?
Okay, so that's rule number 4, delegate. How do you delegate the items on your list? How do you make the business ultimately, it doesn't have to be today, but someday in the future run without you? What have you got for number 5?
Number 5 is come up with your de-riskify plan or your risk mitigation plan. De-riskify is just kind of a fun word I came up with. So this was actually pretty huge for us, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people think about. I think the first few are kind of a little more obvious, but I think the main thing that holds people back from taking action on their dreams and starting their side hustle or their business is fear. It's the fear of what people are going to think of them, the fear of failure, the fear of what if this doesn't work out. And I think the thing that keeps people from growing or scaling their business is fear of risk, fear of what am I going to lose? So one of the things that happened before we started scaling our business was when we first started in the real estate game, it was in May of 2007. And for those of you who know your real estate history, that was not a good time to get into real estate.
Yeah.
Man, I'm getting destroyed.
We're both doing it.
But we started out doing a thing called wholesaling, which essentially was we would put houses under contract and then we would sell the rights to that contract. So we didn't risk, we never actually bought the house. So we weren't risking any money. We weren't risking any repairs or anything like that. A couple years later, when we went to flip our first house, I was scared to death. The thing is, we weren't even using our own money. We were actually using one of our investors' money, but I was so afraid to lose his money. And we made it through that deal, but it caused me to not want to buy any more houses. And so we got into rental properties, and I learned rental criteria and learned how to understand cash flow. And we just went to town. And in a 4-month period, we ended up buying 12 houses, which was more houses than we had bought in that shorter period of time. And it was really exciting. But we got to a point in our life where we were way out of money. Our investors were out of money. We didn't know how to pay the bills. So kicking and screaming, we had to sell some of those houses, and we ended up selling 4 of those houses. And from selling those 4 houses within a couple weeks, we made more money than we needed to pay our bills and all our expenses for over a year. Sorry. And that just changed everything for us. I was like, wow, what if we could do this every month? What if we could make more money than we need for an entire year every month? So we ended up selling the rest of the houses. At the same time, we started buying more houses, but that also met that rental criteria. And it just helped us go to town. I no longer had that thing in my brain, that limbic brain, that lizard brain, the fight or flight that was getting so afraid of taking action because I didn't know what the end result was going to be. I was afraid of losing money. So I was stuck in my tracks. I didn't have that anymore because I was buying houses. I was flipping rentals, essentially. I had a plan B. If something didn't work out, then I would end up with the 100 rental properties that I initially wanted and the cash flow that I was looking for. And so that combined with the systems and the limit, all the things that we've been talking about, just allowed us to really take off and scale. From there, we got a JV partner who put up, this guy had deep pockets. It wasn't like the other guy that I was borrowing money from, who this was his retirement. This guy understood the risk, and we were just able to go to town. So.
Okay. Yeah. Have a plan B that is still acceptable to you, I think probably makes sense versus, you buy, you like the Warren Buffett thing, you make your money when you buy. Like, I'm going to do the forced depreciation thing and sell this to another investor. Let them be the long-term holder of this thing, but I'm going to get my money out quickly as a way to de-risk the whole operation. And I think about what's probably on a lot of people's mind for the last 9 to 12-ish months in the world of online business is algorithm updates and, AI and stuff. Like, how do I de-risk my business from AI? Whether it's diversifying traffic sources, whether it's building an email list, whether it's selling your own product, how are you going to compete in an AI first world? And the answers may look differently for every person, but and that's number 5 here is this de-risk plan, or come up with your de-riskify plan. And
it's going to be different for everyone. The truth is, I don't know about you, but the number one thing people tell us, because we ask our audience, like, hey, what's the number one thing you're stuck with? And it's always money. They're like, I don't have enough money. And you know this, I know this. You don't really need a lot of money to start a business. There's so many different ways you can start a business with little, no money. So it really depends on your situation. And I guess we could talk about this for hours, right? You love service businesses. I love service businesses. Like, there's not a whole lot of risk in going out and trying to get these clients for a service business. And
right.
Anyway, I don't know if that.
In most cases, right? It's like, the startup costs for, almost anything that we talk about would be sub $500, or there's some creative way
100%.
To make it such that it is, that it's within reach, where you're not, having to take out a second mortgage or something to get something off the ground. And when you've kind of minimized your downside exposure and you're taking a swing at something with some upside, with some scale, it's only a matter of time before something hits and, erases all the losses, because the first thing may or may not be the one that actually works. And,
100%.
Having the wherewithal to be like, well, that doesn't make me an abject failure. It just means that idea didn't pan out. So, okay, yep. on to the next thing. So definitely keep your risks low, keep your goals high, and get after it. All right, that's number 5, the de-risk plan. What have you got for number 6?
The number 6 is what I call the $60 an hour rule, or the 3X rule. If someone can do something like a service business, whether it's cleaning, I know you did painting, whether it's gutters, curbs, trash cans, car detailing, yard, tree removal, all that stuff, power washing, parking lots. I'm just naming all kinds of stuff. If you can come up with one of these businesses and you can make at least $60 per hour, you can scale that, because then you just hire out the labor at $20, $25 an hour. Then you focus more on getting the new clients. You hire out the labor, and that's how you can scale those businesses, also known as nail it, then scale it, right?
Okay, so this would be like an agency model. Like, this is the labor, cost of labor ratio that you would like to see. You want to have the final price be triple your labor cost.
Exactly. So my son, for example, he just turned 18 and he's trying to figure out what is he going to do in life, right?
Yeah.
And he's been fixing phones and he's been doing a few different things, but he's gotten to the point where he can make $100 an hour fixing phones. So now he just has to improve his marketing. He has to be able to get more clients. And then he can hire people to do the driving and to do all these different things, like all the different things that we've been talking about that will allow him to focus on his highest and best use of time and ultimately be able to scale the business.
Yeah. This is one where in the context of like SEO and online business, like, okay, based on this projected keyword volume or, traffic volume, if it ends up hitting, and this, projected affiliate ad, it's like really hard to kind of try to figure out, well, what's this page even going to make if it gets to the first page of Google, but say it does, and say it is going to make, $1,000 a year, best case scenario. Like, okay, so it wouldn't be unreasonable to pay somebody $300 to write that article for you and then lather, rinse,
exactly.
repeat. And it's like a timing of cash flow. In this case, like you're going to earn that 1,000 over the course of 12 months, hopefully, and you may not. So that's like where the risk comes into play. But that's where you could kind of pencil in, well, okay, what's my labor cost or what's my potential labor cost for whatever model that I'm in?
And then, you start to buy back some of your time, and then you're able to do the whole think smarter, not work harder, right? Right. You go from labor to leadership, and that's how you really go. You become the rainmaker. That's what you focus on, and then you eventually can hire someone to help you with that marketing. But you've increased your customer base by pretty significantly, and then hopefully you have repeat customers and so on and so forth. So. Yeah, so this one, I have lots of titles for it. But the marketing flywheel, self-liquidation offer, or break-even funnel. Russell Brunson often refers to the break-even funnel, and that's kind of how he grew ClickFunnels. Was he created a webinar and spent X amount of money to get people to register for the webinar, sold the webinar for like $1,000 plus 6 months of ClickFunnels. And the whole concept is you are acquiring customers, you're making money by acquiring customers, or you're acquiring customers for free. And he talks about how he would sometimes talk to venture capitalists and they would ask him, what's your cost to acquire a customer? He's like, oh no, we acquire them for free, or we make money when we acquire customers. And like, wait, this doesn't work for my numbers and my algorithm. And it totally throws me off. But understanding this concept, once again, I think so many people who want to get into business think, oh, I got to have this big, huge tech idea and invest millions of dollars, and why, like, most businesses fail and all this stuff. And it's like, no, like, you just have to figure out one of these models that work for you. And for us right now, we're just focused on how much does it cost us to acquire a new listener. And it took us a year to build up to this, but we're at that break-even point that it cost us about 6 to 8 cents to acquire a new listener, and we're making about 6 to 8 cents for every new listener. So if someone listens to just one more show, then we're spending $1 to make $2, right? And the goal is to keep growing that. Like I have these different algorithms, these different numbers where I know we could make 10 cents per listener, and even up to like a 15 cents per listener. And if and as we continue to do that, these numbers get better and better. And then over time, you could add on programs, different things you're selling. But we don't have any of our own programs at this point, but we're already to that break even or make money point, right? So there's 1,000 different add-ons you can make to that, to where you got your money making machine essentially, right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole goal of business. For every dollar you put in, you're making $2 back, $3 back. How can we make that number bigger and bigger? That every dollar we invest, we're making more and more back.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We have heard from, newsletter operators. Well, if every, they're just very, very elaborate equations that could start to go into it. But like, well, what's a new subscriber worth to us? Does it make sense to pay $2 for a subscriber if they're going to open 50% of the emails and they're going to stay on the list for 9 months and they're going to be exposed? Like, oh, okay, we're going to make $5 from that, one subscriber on average. So yeah, we're happy to pay $2 for it. And so this is on terms of the podcast downloads, this is just on average, we have, 2 or 3, 4 ads per show at this CPM. So every download is worth to us 6 to 8 cents or 6 to 10 cents.
Yep. Yeah, I'm constantly looking at the numbers and analyzing numbers and just seeing, oh, if we pull this one lever and we spend this much money, what does that do to our bottom line?
That's really interesting. Like, only very recently started doing any paid podcast promotion, and it's interesting to look at like the cost per download metrics or cost per subscriber metrics, and I never really thought about it that way. And then if you have a potential guest, could you share the cost with that because they're getting some promotional benefit out of it? But what do you like in terms of, or what platforms do you like in terms of going out and buying listeners?
So at the beginning, we had an agency that we hired that was connecting with a lot of other podcasters, but it was costing us like several dollars to get a download.
Yeah.
And then we started going to like the podcast players, and we started to get a lower amount. But one of the gotchas, something you want to watch out for, is what we didn't realize, because we just didn't know what we didn't know until we were starting to work with an agency to get sponsors for us, was one of these podcast players, a lot of the places they were promoting to were in countries that sponsors, just being honest, they just weren't paying for those areas. So we got to a point where we had like 20% in the US, and our agency was like, that's not going to work. So we had to go back to the drawing. So
it's like Facebook ads. Like, oh yeah, it's cheap if you want to advertise, to a non-US audience or something.
Totally.
Like
that. But then we found, the right players, and if you invest enough, certain players, the amount just goes up depending on like how many people are like bidding on it, right? Or buying the ads. And then there are other players that you can negotiate with the podcast player. And we've done such a high volume at this point where we've gotten some of the players to come down. We're like, hey, we'll keep buying in volume. We just want a good deal. And then they'll throw in, so we mainly buy like the US, but then they'll throw in other places like Canada, Australia, like UK.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to literally like 3x the amount of listeners that we would be getting with them because we've worked out deals. We're buying in bulk. We know they're good listeners. We know we're getting paid well for them. But yeah, another one I really like, this isn't a podcast player, but it's called Podroll. Podroll is amazing because you can get a great CPM by allowing other podcasters to do what's called a feed drop. I don't want to get too technical, too into the weeds here, but doing a feed drop is where another podcaster can put their episode in your feed. And Podroll has a platform that facilitates doing this. Mm-hmm. And so initially we got doing Podroll because we're like, oh, you can make $50 to $100 CPM. But what we realized is we wanted to be on the other end of that, where we're paying $50 to $100 CPM for people to listen to our show, because it sounds like a high CPM, but they're actually listening to your show. It's not just someone hearing a 1-minute ad on someone else's show on your podcast.
Right.
They're actually listening. They're listening to your show. So you get the downloads, and then you get some people that stick with you, and that's how you can grow. So that's been huge for us. It gets pretty exciting. But you can do that. I know we're talking about podcasting, but you can do this, like you said, with an email list. You can do it with, I know I would say a blog. I know there's been a lot of stuff with the updates and whatnot, but it's just all about, and I guess that gets us to our last one, which is, oh no, there's two more. I've been talking too much. Anyway, I'll save that, but you can do this with anything. So
yeah, figuring out what that marketing flywheel is, what that self-liquidating offer may be, if that may be possible in your industry or your niche. Like, how can you acquire customers for free? I think it's a creative marketing
100%.
thought experiment, if nothing else, to figure out, well, where are customers at? How can I set this up in such a way that it doesn't cost me anything to get that next lead into the funnel, that next person into the pipeline there. All right, that's number 7, the marketing flywheel or the break-even funnel. What have you got for number 8?
So number 8 is you want to understand the velocity of money and returns and how they work. And this might sound simple, but I'm telling you, most people do not understand it. In fact, I read something earlier that said 2/3 of American adults cannot pass a very basic financial test, right? We just don't learn this stuff in school. But the velocity of money basically says, for example, we started flipping houses, we were making anywhere from 15 to 20% on the money that we invested into a particular house. And it would take us about 4 months to flip a house. So there's there's 12 months in a year. We could essentially turn that money 3 times. So essentially, if you're making 10 to 15% and you're doing that 3 times a year, that's
it's probably more than that, but it's probably.
I think I messed up these numbers. 15 to 20, 15 to 20% are the numbers. You make 15 to 20% on your money, and you do that three times a year. You're making 45 to 60% annualized.
Yeah, nominally, I'm sure there's like some other velocity, time component or time value element to it too. But right, like, okay, how quickly can I get a return on it, and how often can I lather, rinse, repeat? Is that my understanding?
Yeah, exactly. So we're making 15 to 20% per house. We're doing that 3 times a year on that given money, and that was 45 to 60% for the year. So what we did, I mentioned this JV partner. I went to this guy. This guy had deep pockets, millions of dollars, knew the real estate game, was just kind of retired. And I said, hey, here's our track record. Here's all the houses. Here are the numbers we're getting. Would you be interested in putting up the money? And we split the profit. And he took a look at it and he's like, heck yeah. I mean, it took a little more than that, but essentially that's what it came down to. And he essentially gave us a blank check. So we now knew we had the systems to buy the houses. We had the systems to fix up the houses. We just needed more money, and that was our money. And that's the other thing that helped us really grow, because his return, all he did was he's like, okay, so I'm going to make anywhere from 22.5 to 30% annualized. That's a heck of a lot better than what I'm making in anything else I'm doing.
Yeah.
So since that time, I've talked to a lot of different people and done this with a lot of different businesses. I talked to a guy that had like a grass-fed like beef business. So he raised cows essentially. And he was like, oh, I want to do more of this. I just don't have the money. And I'm like, okay, how much does it cost you to buy a cow? How much does it cost to feed the cow? Like, what are all the expenses that go into that cow?
Right.
How long does it take till the cow gets slaughtered? I hope anyone listening isn't, gets too offended by this, but how long does it take till you're able to essentially sell the cow? And we broke the numbers down, and it was like 100% annualized returns. I'm like, dude, I'll give you all the money you want. And I said, a better thing to do, though, is now that you know that you can make 100% annualized return on the money invested, just go borrow it at 10%.
Okay.
And then you're essentially making 90, it's arbitrage, right? You're taking other people's money, you have the system in place, and you're making a killer return on that money.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. And I think about it most often in the context of an e-commerce business or a physical product business. Okay, I'm going to buy 500 bucks of inventory, sell it next month for 600, and now I've got $600 worth of inventory, and I can sell it for 750, and it kind of like continue to level up and multiply your money. But like how you would think about it in context of inventory turns, and coming from the car business, like, how much inventory is in our parts department right now? That was always like the dealers wanted to know, like, how many millions of dollars are we sitting on parts? Like, what hasn't sold lately? Do we really need this sitting on the shelf? Like, could that money be better deployed elsewhere? And it's like, okay, this could really apply to any business that has an investment component to it, a cost of labor or a cost of goods type of aspect to it, like cost of houses in a flipping type of business.
Yeah, no, but you're right. E-commerce is a great example. And you just essentially run the numbers. If the numbers make sense, and you can either bring on a JV partner if you don't want to take on the risk, but usually you'll find that the cool thing about business is, if and when, like you said, it's hard to get started. It's hard to get that inertia, hard to get that thing going, put that thing up into orbit. But once you do, a business typically will pay you significantly more than you're ever going to make in any other kind of investment, which then allows you to get the investors coming to you. So rather than, that's what I believe in. I don't think most people should go out and raise a ton of money unless you've experienced in that kind of thing. But if you're not that experienced in raising money and growing a huge business, nail it first, then scale it, right? Go start that e-com business, go start that SaaS business, whatever that thing is, and then start to get some proven numbers. And if you can come to someone like me and you can show, hey, these are the things I'm selling, this is how much I'm making, these are the returns, I'll give you the money, no problem. No problem, all day long.
All right. Well, you may be getting some calls after this. That's number 8, velocity
Sounds
of money.
good.
Number 9 on the 9 rules of scale. Go for it.
So number 9 is the aggregation of marginal gains, also referred to as like the compound effect. But essentially, the aggregation of marginal gains, many people know about it from the book Atomic Habits, or James Clear and his blog.
Yeah.
And it essentially is from the British cycling company, the British cycling team back in the day. For like 100 years, they were horrible. They only won like 1 gold medal in that time, and they brought in this guy to be the new manager of the cycling team. His name was Dave Brailsford, and the way he did things is most people came in there like, all right, we're going to make this huge improvement by doing this one thing. It's going to change everything, and it just wasn't working out. So he was all about this thing that we're talking about, called the aggregation of marginal gains. And he just said, if we can take every little component of what it takes to be good at cycling or to make you faster, whether it has to do with the bike or the athlete, then we're just going to do that. We're going to make 1% improvement each day, as much as we can, in all these different categories. And within 5 years, the British cycling team just started dominating. They started winning almost every gold medal. They started winning Tour de France's, which they hadn't done previously in 100 years. And it just changed everything. And he was just focused on the one small thing. And so that's what I would invite everyone who's listening to do. Don't just think about everything. I mean, we're in the information age. You're literally listening to a podcast. There's so much information out there. I love like swipe and deploy, see what people are doing and just be like, oh, let's try that. It's a different industry, but I can try it here. We try it out. We test it out. We keep going with what's working. We keep trying to improve the things that aren't working. I'm constantly talking to my team about how can we improve the podcast? How can we get more numbers? How can we improve everything that we're doing just little by little? And as you do those things over time, you'll see a huge difference in your business.
Yeah, this 1% improvement every day, which like doesn't make a huge difference. It may not even be noticeable, but over time it really does start to compound. And that's like, Einstein's eighth wonder of the world, like compound interest and all this stuff, where it really does start to lead to some exponential growth over time. But the trick is doing it consistently, making it a habit. Yep. So the compound effect for number 9. Let's move on to round 2, the donate a business idea round. What have you got for us here?
So I have business ideas every day, as I'm sure you do as well. But kind of the idea, and it's related to all the things that I've been working on, combined with different things that have been happening in my life. So recently we traveled the world for 9 months, as you know, and we were in Rome just a couple months ago. And as we were in Europe and these different places, we're doing all these tours, and some were okay, but some of them were kind of long and a little boring, but it was almost like a necessary evil. I felt like I'm glad I'm doing this tour, but I'm kind of bored and it's a little long. And I thought, there needs to be like something called 10-minute tours or something like that. And I know they have audio tours, but I was like, what if there was like a podcast that had like a tour? And then my mind got going to like a history lesson. And maybe it's longer than 10 minutes, maybe because now that I'm thinking about the ads that you can put in, maybe it's a little longer so we can put more ads in. But you have 30-minute to 40-minute lessons, and there's so many lessons you could do on history just in Italy alone, because we were in Italy for like 38 days. I'm like, you could do a lesson on that, on that, on that, on that, on that. And I actually, part of the reason why I had this idea too is I know another guy who has a history podcast, but he does it himself. And his returns are bigger than ours, just because there's a lot of business podcasts. And so he invests in his podcast, and the amount of people that stick and the amount of money he has to spend to get more listeners are significantly higher than what ours are. So I was taking all these ideas. I was like, I don't know a lot about history, but I know there's a lot of people out there who do know a lot about history, and they're probably not making a ton of money. I thought, you could reach out to them. And then Tara made an ad for our podcast the other day, and we got this great guy with a great voiceover voice. Just the number, just sounded amazing. And I was like, you get the person who writes these things, get the person who's going to record them, and then just work with different podcast players and promoting these. So this guy, once again, he spends all day creating this, and you could tell he works really hard on him. But I was like, man, you could put this thing together, bring the people together. You could pay them equity, so there's no cost. or if you have a little bit of money, you could just pay them whatever they would get paid, and ultimately you make more money.
Yeah.
And
or maybe
just
be like an AI voiceover artist at this point.
100%. Yeah, I was thinking of all that too. I was like, you could probably do some AI stuff. You could probably do, especially like AI online is kind of tough because you have Google like crawling it and everything. But podcasting, no one's crawling podcasting, right? So you could even create these lessons through AI. You could record them yourself, or you could have someone else record them. But then the same idea, like for every dollar you spend, you could easily make 2 back. And you could essentially have this thing be, you could be a big part of it, or you could just kind of outsource it to different people. And anyway, I'm just sitting there at the Coliseum and the forum, and I'm like, this guy's kind of boring. Like, but like people need these lessons. They're incredibly valuable. And I think it would just take off. Anyway. So if I had more time, I'd do it. But
yeah, that's the business idea donation audio history lessons or audio walking tours. We've been on some that were incredible. We had this British guy in Barcelona who was just like so into the history of the city, and hey, we're here we're going from the 5th century to the 15th, and it's awesome. Right across the street from and he was really into it, and he told us that the FC Barcelona, like the logo is like got those 4 red stripes. He's like, that was like the king's bloody fingers, like running down we're like, oh, dude, man. I will never look at that, logo awesome. the same way again. And then we've had other ones where you're kind of like, yeah, I'm getting something here, but it's he's the bar now that everything else is measured against. And it's interesting. But yeah, this could be an interesting one, hiring historians to write or repurpose lessons. Maybe they already have. Maybe could I license these from you? Yeah. And then hiring a voiceover artist or using some AI voiceover to, be the voice of your podcast might be interesting to play around with.
And you can do the same thing with science or any subject, right? It goes on, but just, what came to mind?
Yeah. You got to scratch your own itch from these boring tours.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, round 3 is the triple threat. This is, first off, a marketing tactic that's working for you right now. Could be this pod roll stuff. Could be something else you got in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've kind of went through that. It's just working with the podcast players to promote the show. And we have our numbers pretty dialed in. Like, I'm pretty aware of what it costs us for each podcast. And if it's not working, each pod player, if that doesn't work, I reach out to them and try to negotiate a better deal, or we focus on other ones. And then from that, like I said, we're going to leverage it into working more with podcast swaps and all that. So that's kind of our main focus. At some point, we do want to launch a program, but we're just trying to hang in as long as we can. Because once we do that, it's a whole nother thing to take care of. We're just trying to generate a bunch of cash, because cash will allow us to hire more people and just keep that flywheel going.
Right. Yeah. If you can get somebody to tune in for multiple episodes, they join the email list, maybe they eventually buy the, to be determined future product. Yeah,
totally.
There's a lot of good things that can happen.
And it could be an affiliate marketing at the beginning, right? There's so many different options.
All right. A new or new to you tool that you're loving right now.
Might sound kind of boring and not that exciting. I just love my Google Calendar. That is my second brain. I put anytime I have an idea, a thought, I put it in my calendar. If I have it to do, I put it in there. And then I just either delete them, like eliminate, automate, or delegate. That's my list, right? So every day I'll have my list of top priorities. I'll check it out the day before, make sure it's what I want to do for the next day. And I'll either delete it, I'll move it over, like sometimes months away. Sometimes it felt like a great idea and then it's not anymore. But I'm always trying to figure out how can I systematize this? How can I do? But I use the Google Calendar. It's not that sexy, but I use it all the time. It's my calendar of where to go, where to be, what to do. It's what I live by. I never wake up and don't know what to do because it's always there.
Very good. Not a new tool, but a very useful one at that. So, I like that one as well. It's like, and I find myself too, I'll block off that time and be like, it's not important right now. Like I'll punt that off until next month. But like it's in there. It's kind of a reminder that you thought this was important at one point.
Exactly.
Is it still? All right. So that is the tool and a favorite book from the last 12 months.
So in getting ready for this, I re-listened to the book Procrastination on Purpose by Vaden. Rory Vaden. Oh, okay. And he also has a good TED Talk on it, and he kind of talks about the focus funnel, and he does go over, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll teach something or talk about something and I almost forget where I learned it from. So as I listened to that again, I was like, oh yeah, he talked about the eliminate, the automate, the delegate, and then he goes as far as to procrastinate on purpose, right? If it's not a priority now, and then concentrate. And so that was a pretty good read, I thought. He talks about ROTI, return on time invested, which is a lot about what we've been talking about, and how that's like the best investment you can make is working on your business instead of just in your business, and it'll pay you back dividends for time to come.
Yeah, return on time. You start off doing the $10 an hour things, and you graduate to the $100 an hour things, and then hopefully you graduate to the $1,000 an hour things. And I like this. I have not read this book, Procrastinate on Purpose, but we'll link that up in the show notes for this episode. You can just follow the episode, follow the link in the episode description, and I'll get right over there. Millionaire University. Justin Williams, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to check out the podcast, check out the website at millionaireuniversity.com. Any parting words of guidance before we wrap up here?
I would just say, take action. That's what everyone says, but take action. And then after you've taken action, don't just keep taking action. Start to think about, how can I use leverage? How can I grow? How can I implement the things that we're talking about today, so that you can really get to the point where you're making more money with less time? And once again, I don't want that to sound like cheesy or like woo-woo or fake, but you really can. The same things that helped us get to the point where we were flipping 100 houses a year also gave us more time, because if we were the bottleneck, if we were the one doing it, there was no way that would have happened. Same with our education business. So just take action, but then start thinking about, how can I take that next level of action that will get me to that next level, and just keep living a life on purpose.
Yeah, it's such an interesting distinction between, how can I make extra money, right? I'm going to go solve this problem, and then flipping the switch to be like, how can I be a business owner, and trying to fire yourself from the doing stuff, and promoting yourself to the CEO role. And it's a different set of questions. I think it's really interesting stuff. So again, millionaireuniversity.com. Check out the podcast. I was an early guest on there. Brian was my interviewer for that one. I think that's a good one to start with. But big thanks to Justin for sharing his insight. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this content free for everyone. As always, you can hit up sidehustlenation.com/deals for all the latest offers from our sponsors in one place. Thank you for supporting the advertisers that support the show. That is it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're finding value in the show, the greatest compliment is to share it with a friend. So fire off that text message. Hey, I think you'll like this episode. Hey, I think you should check this out. Until next time, let's go out there and make something happen. And I'll catch you in the next edition of The Side Hustle Show. Hustle on.